Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. In the past couple of weeks, we have seen multiple massive billionaire families, the Waltons from behind Walmart, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, make significant changes to their stock portfolios. But all these changes have one thing in common. They're pulling collectively billions of dollars out of the stock market. Now, ask yourself a logical question. When all these billionaires and billionaire families and organizations all of a sudden, over the course of a couple of weeks, start pulling large, massive amounts, we're talking billions of dollars out of the stock market, what do they see that we don't see? And on top of that, on March 11th, there's an emergency funding that was set aside for all these banks that gets pulled back. So all the banks that were kept on life support, that life support switch gets flicked off on March 11th. So are these events, are they related? Is there a coincidence, or is there something bigger that's happening here? So joining us today to help make sense of this is my good friend, Dr. Kirk Elliott. So folks, please enjoy the interview. Kirk, as usual, it's great to see you, man. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you doing?
Actually, really well. Yeah, really well. Got a new baby. I'm actually in the new studio right now, which is like amazing. And it's life is good. Yeah, life is good. There's a lot of beautiful things.
You getting sleep?
Yeah.
Good.
There's still those, those midnight wake ups and the 2 a.m. wake ups and all that.
Yeah.
But it's like I get woken up by this beautiful little baby girl that just needs help.
So that's so sweet.
Yes. So it's funny because, before we do our shows, a lot of times we're going back and forth and sharing articles. And a lot of times you're saying, hey, Seth, here's what I'm researching this week. And you sent me some things that actually were just in line with some content that I was looking over this past couple of days. And so I have a video that I set aside to start our discussion with that I want to play. It's a portion of a video, but I'll be playing about a minute and a half or so. So let me go ahead and play this first, and then we can get into the discussion because it really sets the stage for us. So I'll go ahead and play this. And it's from a YouTube channel. It's this guy called This is John Williams, to give him his appropriate credit where credit is due. So let me go ahead and play this for everyone.
Hey, what's up, guys? John here. Did you know in March of 2020, banks were not required to have any of your own money, 0 of your deposits inside of the bank? Instead, they were just lending out tons and tons of money on commercial real estate, on cars, 30-40% of our sticker price, on homes, on small business loans. They were lending all of this money out. Well, on March 11th, in 15 days, that comes to an end. And thousands of banks are about to get rug pulled. Thousands. And with it, hundreds of millions of Americans are set to be impacted. I'm going to show you some video of Janet Yellen. I'm going to show you some verifiable facts as to what's going on here. And then when you connect those dots, and then you look at, hey, what are the smartest, the wealthiest people in the world doing right now, or at least in America? Warren Buffett selling $28.7 billion worth of stock, sitting on the biggest mountain of cash they've ever sat on in Berkshire Hathaway. Jeff Bezos selling $8.5 billion in stock in the course of a week. You have Mark Zuckerberg selling $500 million worth of stock over the last several months. You have all these billionaires liquidating right now. Why would they be doing this?
Billionaires and CEOs are unloading stock and at an increasing pace.
JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon planning his first stock sale since taking over as CEO nearly 2 decades ago.
Jeff Bezos is reportedly looking to offload more of his stake in Amazon.
Why? Why all at the same exact time? Well, maybe because they realize everything's about to change.
So I watched that and I was like, oh man, this is exactly what Kirk and I are always talking about. And so let me go and hand it back over to you. What are you seeing here? What do you make of that?
So it is truly exactly everything that we've been talking about. I think it's a little ironic that you were looking at that and I was pulling up some articles and different SEC documents and so forth, because when you're big, like Jeff Bezos, for example, and you're the CEO of a big, massive company that's publicly traded, you have to let the SEC know when you're going to make a sales to avoid, insider trading and stuff like that. So you can pull up all these documents. Now, Bezos did two issuances, one for $8.5 billion, the other one for like $2.06 billion. So that's $10.5 billion for him. Zuckerberg, $500 million. Bill Gates, which wasn't, in that video, his was pretty recent, basically said he's selling everything except for his agricultural land, which he's the largest landowner in America. So, selling everything except something that's real, right? It's like, that's everything that we've been talking about. So here's where, on all these people, you don't listen to what they say, just watch what they do, because actions speak louder than words, right? He's keeping his agricultural land. He's no longer the majority shareholder in Microsoft. Walton family that own Walmart sold $4.5 billion worth of their shares just a few days ago. Right. So you look at this, it's like, what is this a coincidence that they all just happen to be selling at the same time? And not just small chunks, but like billions of dollars worth. So I don't think it's a coincidence. The last time that we saw something like this, there was a big market crash in like 21, and Bezos had gotten out right before, right? So it's like, you look at this, it's like, what do they know that we don't? I don't know. You and I watch this stuff all the time, but they're part of meetings that we're not part of, like World Economic Forum meetings, where they're planning the demise of countries, right? They're planning chaos so they can usher in their new thing, central bank digital currency, right? Which is not about fixing a system. It's about people control. So who would ever vote for something like that, or want it, or give support to it? So who would vote for that? The answer is probably nobody, if they actually knew what it was about. But people will willingly give up their freedoms and security, in exchange for perceived security and peace from somewhere else, right? So this is what I think is happening. But now you add a couple other pieces into this mix. So why would these multi-billionaires be selling their stuff? Well, the nature
$1 billion
is,
question.
really is $1 billion question. I mean, but you look at him like Bezos, he's a narcissist, right? It's like, he thinks he's great. His company is big. There's no lie. It's like one of the biggest in the world, right? So when you have that kind of a philosophy, it's like, well, I don't care what the hurdles are. I'm good. My company's good. We're going to succeed. Why would you ever sell your own shares? It's not like he's selling some other company shares. He's selling his own in his own company. Well, I would say, no matter how good you are or how good you think you are, you're only as good as the economy that you're built into. So I think that all these people, even though they're globalists, even though they're Democrats, think that Bidenomics stinks. I mean, they know that they're not going to be selling much. They know that there's probably going to be a crash happening. And that's why they're getting out of Dodge. This is the mantra of every single investor around the world: buy low and sell high, right? So that's what they're doing. They're selling these at a inflated price and getting out. Now, a couple months ago, two other people that aren't on this current list actually did the same thing. Warren Buffett, and you and I talked about this one. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, right? Berkshire Hathaway is sitting on more cash than they ever have in the history of Berkshire Hathaway. And to what end? Well, we don't have to speculate, because he said it in the shareholder meeting. Said, we're sitting on a mountain of cash so we can buy distressed companies at a huge discount after the crash. After the crash. Interesting choice of words, right? What about Blackstone? After Evergrande, the big, massive Chinese real estate company, went belly up, filed for bankruptcy in Hong Kong courts. The settlement was what? People who owned Evergrande bonds got $1 for every 100, which means they lost 99% of their value. But it's worse than that, because basically most US companies, big banks, hedge funds, or whatever that were invested in them, they lost everything, because the bankruptcy court judge in China said, we're going to pay off Chinese investors first, and foreign ones, if they get it, they get it. We're not concerned, right? So this is going to have this tentacle effect across the globe, right? Because 300, I think it was like 300 to 350 billion of their losses were owned by US banks and financial institutions. That just gets wiped away. That's a big loss to take, right? So that contagion will spread. Banks will be, defaults on their loans that they were expecting massive amounts of interest payments back. So now they're undercapitalized. Well, they're undercapitalized even more, as that video that you showed expressed. And this is something we talked about, I don't know, a dozen times between then and now, which is you look at where the reserve requirement was with banks back in March of 2020, at the height of COVID, when the economy was at its worst. Well, people thought it was at its worst. It's actually worse now than it was then. But they changed the reserve requirement to zero. Regulation D from the Federal Reserve said, banks, when you get $100 in deposits, you can lend out $100. You don't have to keep anything back, because normally it was 10%, where for every $100 you deposited, they would lend out 90, keep 10 for, if there's withdrawals or whatever, and people need money. But they did it to zero. Why would you ever do that? Well, to stimulate the economy. The more money that you can lend out, the more people will spend. That should stimulate the economy. The problem was their other policies were stifling the economy. Shelter-in-place laws, travel restrictions, masks, shutting down mom and pop stores right during COVID. So they're saying we're going to stimulate the economy with policy, but we're shutting down the economy with other policy, right? It's like, who's going to win? Well, what won was the banks got all kinds of emergency funding, a ton of it. This started happening after Silicon Valley Bank went down. There was a program called the Bank Temp Funding Program, which, Seth, do you remember TARP? After 2009, when Lehman Brothers and all those went belly up, there's a stupid TARP program, which was like emergency funding from the government to keep the economy afloat. Biggest boondoggle ever, right? It's like trillions of dollars were spent. And to what end? I don't know. But it was stimulus money. This bank temp funding program is similar to TARP, except it's only earmarked for banks. So if you're a failing bank, if you're about to get a bank run, if you're undercapitalized, you get money from the Fed. So that's what stopped the bank runs when Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, Silvergate, Credit Suisse, First Republic, when they all went down, the people thought, oh man, they fixed it. There's been no more banks that have gone under since then, really, right? So, but no, they didn't fix it. They put a Band-Aid on it with this emergency funding package, so there would be no more bad news about banks failing. But now that program sunsets on March 11th. It's done.
So it's
just
almost
gone.
It's kind of like, Silicon Valley Bank and a handful of banks that collapsed at that point. They died, right? And so, the government looked at it and it's like, okay, these banks just died. That's really bad for the banking industry. There's a lot of other banks that are also like near death, so we're going to put them on life support, right? So you have all these banks that are just like barely breathing on life support from this emergency funding. But what happens when that life support gets turned off? And this is the big question. So March 15th, they're basically saying that, okay, March 15th, we're going to go around and all these banks that were on life support through this emergency funding, we're going to unplug them. I mean, a little bit, it's maybe a little bit morbid, but is that what we're looking at here?
Well, that is what we're looking at, but to me, it does get worse. So I'm not saying every bank is going to fail on March 11th. No, I'm not saying that at all. That's when the emergency funding ends. So every point after that, when banks, are undercapitalized and fail stress tests and start to go under, they're not getting any emergency funding. Well, here's where this combination of things really starts to come into play. Reserve requirement going from 0 to 20% means if you're a $1 billion bank and you had zero on hand, now you have to come up with 200 million, or else you cease to be a bank because you're out of compliance. Well, where are they going to come up with that 200 million? Because 20% of $1 billion, if you're $1 billion bank, is 200 million.
Folks, perhaps you'd agree with me when I say that over the past 5 years, the mainstream healthcare system's credibility has plummeted. Alternative healthcare systems that aren't beholden to medical consensus or big pharma are on the rise. Sweetamine is time-tested and proven to boost your life with better health. It's one of the leading products that helps with inflammation and daily aches and pains. Just because you get older, it doesn't mean that you have to feel old. And folks, did you know that most of the diseases that make people sick and die these days are rooted in chronic inflammation, oftentimes due to glycine deficiency? So sweetamine is composed mainly of the amino acid glycine, the nutrient that the immune system uses to regulate inflammation. So with once daily sweetamine, most people feel the reduction in pain after just a few days. So I challenge you to the 12-day sweetamine challenge to fight inflammation and take control of your health today. So folks, buy sweetamine online at sweetamine.com or call 855-GET-SWEET. That's 855-438-7933. And make sure you use promo code SETH, SETH, to get a nice discount on your purchase.
Well, if they don't get it, they're going to basically go out of business, or else they get bought out by another bank that's bigger than them, right? This is what's been happening in this consolidation. So you've got that happening where banks are going to run out of money. So this has a dramatic impact on the economy, because what's going to happen if they know that they have to come up with all these reserves? They're going to hold on to everything that they've got, right? They're not going to lend it out to people, to companies when they need money the most, because they need the money themselves or they go out of business. But it's like, okay, normally when that happens, they just go to the Fed and say, hey, we need an emergency loan. We need an interday loan. We need something, or we need this bank temp funding program to kick in and get us some money because we're going to go under. It's like, ooh, can't do that anymore either, because that sunsets on March 11th. So changing the reserve requirements, banks are going to have to cough up a lot of money, but now there's no more emergency funds coming in. This is a recipe for disaster right now. You also have rising interest rates. They keep saying that they're going to lower them, but they don't. So now the longer that goes on, as wages are coming down under Biden's economic plan for America, you're going to have more delinquencies, a series of them ultimately ends in default. That's going to put stress on the banks, right? So you see all of this happening. To me, it's no wonder. It's absolutely no wonder that these multi-bazillionaires, it's not a real number, but they're getting out of Dodge. I think they see the writing that's on the wall. And it's more than maybe the writing on the wall. They know what comes next, because they've been talking about central bank digital currency at these meetings for years, right? Since like 2019, some of these things started to surface: programmable money, digital social profiles, social credit score, ideologically based, spending, blah, blah, blah. They talked about it. So this is the problem that I see moving forward. And when you but it still gets even worse than that. So let's say a bank were to go under, about to go under into FDIC receivership, some other bank buys them out, right, to save the day. Well, this happened with Signature Bank. Signature Bank was one of the 5 that went under during Silicon Valley. Who bought them? New York Community Bank. New York Community Bank in January is now hitting the skids. Their share price went down 70% in 1 month. But why? So to think that a good company can buy toxic assets and they're not going to impact your balance sheet, that's foolishness, right? So imagine you're sitting at your desk, you have this nice, refreshing, cold glass of water, right? Next to it, you have a glass of poison. Right. So what happens if you just put a few drops of that poison in your nice, tall, refreshing glass of cold water? It taints all the water in that glass. Right. So this is what happens to maybe a good bank. Maybe New York Community Bank was amazing. They bought toxic assets from a failed bank, and they think that it's not going to impact their own balance sheet. They're fools, right? They are. So this is what's going to happen as banks start consolidating, buying out these distressed banks. It taints everything.
It's a domino
And now
effect.
that bank is probably going to have to go into receivership. But don't worry, Seth. Don't worry. There's even bigger banks like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, HSBC that are going to buy all these out. So I think this is their goal, right? Is to get rid of these small and medium banks. And maybe they keep them as small or medium banks, but they're now all owned by the big monster banks. And that's all they care about. Because if they're ushering in a new system of people control through banking, they don't want any opposition. They don't want the thousands of Christian conservative patriot bank presidents that are out there getting in their way. So you know what? Let's just change the rules. Let's just change the reserve requirements. Legal thing to do. Okay, let's get rid of any kind of emergency funding. Okay, also a legal thing to do. So they're creating this world where they're putting their competition out of business or any naysayers to their program. So the only ones that are left are the people running the show. You know, the 7 or 8 big monster banks around the world that are really want this system. So here's where it's a little mysterious when you start connecting some of these dots, because we're talking about Western banking as a means for them to control people in Europe and America. What are the BRICS nations doing? They're taking it one step further and saying they got problems there. Their banks are failing. We're going to make it worse. We're actually going to get rid of the petrodollar and start trading in our own currency. And not only is that going to build up our currencies as it builds more demand for our currency, if with all oil being settled in our local currencies, we're going to kill the dollar at the same time and take away the demand for the US dollar. See, this amplifies the problem. They are playing a masterful chess game. They truly are in the BRICS nations, and we're not. We're fighting these battles of running out of money, and then you've got lies coming out of DC, where Jerome Powell said on Meet the Press when he had this interview on there for or maybe it was 60 minutes. Yeah, I think it was 60 minutes. He was on for a full hour, right? So what did he say? He said, "I'm not concerned about our future debt." It's like, what? You must be the only person in the world that's not concerned about our future debt. But okay, if you're not concerned about it, how about our current debt? They don't think that we have a problem that we can't solve. Well, if there's no debt problem, then why do you have to keep raising the debt ceiling every single year? Because you keep running out of money and you threaten that you're going to shut down the government unless you get emergency funding. Don't tell me that that's not a problem, right? Then you've got other lies like Gavin Newsom, meeting on Meet the Press in an interview. And like 70% of America, Democrats and Republicans, think that Biden's too old and not fit to be the president. So the interviewer asked him, it's like, what do you think of his age and is it detrimental? And Gavin Newsom says, oh no, you're getting it all wrong. It's his age that makes him so good, because that wisdom that comes with years of service. And this is why he's done so well. It's like, does anybody actually believe that? Right? Do they? I don't think so. And the Bible tells us that there's wisdom that comes with age, right? However, there's a turning point and it starts to deteriorate. And we're beyond that.
We're well past that.
We're well past that with our current Mr.
So
Biden.
basically,
this is.
Well, no, sorry. So I was going to say that it kind of wrapping this all together. It's like, okay, so we have this March 11th emergency funding gets cut off. We know that a lot of these banks are already very unhealthy, as we've talked about with Weiss ratings, et cetera. You now have in the past couple of weeks, all of these billionaires dumping stocks, billions and billions and billions of dollars, because when if the banks have issues, there's a good chance, I'm guessing, it will carry over to Wall Street. So they see something. They see something that has to do with the stock market, and so it has to do with the banking system, and they're making moves. Why is Bill Gates going to land as his only asset? Why is it that so many banks that we've watched are buying up so much precious metals? So something, I think they know something that actually they know something that we know too, because we're following it, but a lot of people don't know what's coming. And it's the age old way of extreme wealth for these elites is that they know when the cycles of up and down are. They sell when everything's high. They have all their cash. They're liquid. When there's blood on the streets, that's when they buy everything up. And that's how they keep through wars and everything. They keep getting richer and richer. So anyway, Kirk, I know you have an interview coming right up after this that you have to jump to. But finally, if somebody does want to move assets out of the stock market or out of the bank, what are your thoughts?
I would do it yesterday. I mean, on something like this, when you see all these billionaires getting out, my antennas would go up at minimum and say, why are they getting out? Right. But on something like this, when they all do this within a couple weeks span of each other, I think they see something that's more imminent rather than way down the road. Right. And on something like this, I would rather be 9 months, 6 months, 3 months early than one day late. Right. So I would get out of more traditional assets as soon as you can, and I would allocate into strength, into tangible assets that get out of their unified ledger system, programmable money system, digital currency system, go into something that's real, something that's tangible, and something that's growing really well. There's safety in that. There's peace that comes from that. And that's why I'd recommend that now. So you can either, call us if you have questions on it, 720-605-3900, or they can go to your website, right? That you have for this, and goldwithseth.com. So goldwithseth.com, or call us 720-605-3900. Just say, Seth, you heard me and Seth talk, and we'll answer your questions. We'll hear you. We'll listen to your fears. We'll listen to your goals. We'll listen to your dreams, and then help you craft a strategy using tangible assets like silver to protect, preserve, grow, thrive, and move forward in this ridiculously horrible economy with a smile on your face. I mean, what else could you ask for, right? But this is where time and a place for everything. And in times like this, precious metals do really, really well. When do they not? Like during the Reagan years, during the first few Trump years, when the economy was booming, people were working, wallets were fat and happy, right? It's like interest rates were coming down. That's when people don't need to search for an alternative asset. But you know what? We're not there right now. No. And we won't be for years. Even if Trump were to come back tomorrow, one of the best business building, economy building presidents ever, even if we were to come back tomorrow, there's so much damage that's been done to our economy that's going to take a while to unwind. It's easily a year before we start to see a dramatic turnaround. So take advantage of this transition that we're in right now, allocate into strength, and we'll help you do that.
And I'd say for people that have been on the fence for a long time or thinking about it, now's the time. I mean, it really is. So you look at what these billionaires are doing. There's a reason why they're pulling all their money out of the stock market. So let this be that little catalyst that just pushes you over. So, Kirk, thank you again. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate the time that you make for me. It's always great having you on. So take care and God bless.
It's my pleasure. We'll talk soon. God bless.
All right.